Well met, adventurers. I'm your host, the Dungeon Master, and I bid thee welcome to a brand new Let's Play of a game published by Mages, formerly known as Nitro Plus, 5BP, Chumaru Studio, and Bink Video. Welcome, well, to ChäoS World. A world of kaleidoscopes and utter insanity. If you haven't been paying attention, ladies and gentlemen, you should know what this is. Welcome, one and all, to Let's Play ChäoS Child, the thematic sequel to the visual novel ChäoS Head, of which I did a Let's Play, which I finished, well, at the time of the recording of this episode, yesterday, the 28th of May. To be honest, I wasn't sure whether or not I would ever do an LP of this game, but then, since I decided to dive into a full-fledged Let's Play of ChäoS Head, which is the first chapter in the vaunted science adventure series, which include other chapters. Yep, don't want to do that. We shall enter, so that it doesn't cycle through, because believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, adventurers all around the world, this is going to be a blind LP. Unlike my Let's Plays of ChäoS Head, Steins Gate, and Steins Gate 0, this LP is going to be 100% completely blind. I have not played this visual novel, I have not seen the anime adaptation. I did see the adaptation of ChäoS Head, however, which didn't quite translate the more disturbingly macabre aspects of the visual novel. But the less we say about the anime, the better. At least that's my thoughts on the matter. But as I was saying before the screen rudely cut me off, is that ChäoS Head was followed by the more well-known, iconic Steins Gate, the second chapter in the science adventure visual novel series, as well as a third chapter, Robotics Notes, which I don't think I'll be playing because I don't think Robotics Notes has a English localization. Then again, neither did ChäoS Head. The Let's Play that I did used a fan translation, which was actually pretty decent, give or take a few bugs. I'm looking at you, Chapter 6 and 7. But ChäoS Child, the follow-up to ChäoS Head, did actually receive an official localization by the creators of ChäoS Head and Steins Gate themselves. You saw their credentials, and as I mentioned before, Nitro Plus eventually transformed into Mages, though they still continued working on the science adventure series. Now, before we get right into the meat and grit of this Let's Play, should probably show you the fact that I had to adjust the sound considerably, because the default sound is so loud that it would drown out my Let's Play commentary. But of course, I had to do a few sound checks to make sure that neither my volume nor the background volume drowned each other out. And I think I'm pretty much happy with the current volume setup here. One thing to also note is that I can actually play this with a game controller, a gamepad controller, like my Afterglow gamepad controller. But since I did ChäoS Head with a mouse and keyboard, I'm also going to be doing this with a mouse and keyboard. And speaking of which, that's exactly what I did with my Let's Plays of Steins Gate and Steins Gate 0. Saving system data. Back we go. And of course, you couldn't fail to notice that ChäoS Child had the, if we go back, It has the same words underneath its title like its predecessor ChäoS had. But we won't linger on that screen, otherwise it will take us to a cutscene that we still haven't yet to see. The only thing I know about ChäoS Child thus far, until we dive into the insanity and madness within, is the fact that it takes place either months or years after the events of ChäoS had. And I think it won't be too long before we actually find out what the timeline actually is. And that brings me to a fine point of please do not post spoilers in the comment section of these episodes. I know that is an archaic warning given the spread of the internet nowadays, but I have not perused this title, and I doubt anyone watching this Let's Play series has either. And I will be dropping as few references to ChäoS Head as possible for the courtesy of those who have not seen my Let's Play or any other person's Let's Play of ChäoS Head, all 145 episodes. And speaking of that, brings up the point that this Let's Play series is probably going to be just as long, if not longer. And it will continue to do so in as long as I keep rambling on like this. So, without further ado, I think it is time for us to start a new game and enter the dark, dilapidated world of Let's Play ChäoS Child. November 6th, 2009, 10:28 p.m. 2009, of course, was when ChäoS Head drew to a close. It came without warning. City that never sleeps. And no, I'm not talking about New York. Because this isn't America. This is Japan. More specifically, the city of Shibuya. And if you watch my Let's Play of ChäoS Head, you will know exactly what happened that fateful day. It was a magnitude 7.8 earthquake with an epicenter directly under the city. An event that only a few select people would know the name of, such as myself. The phenomenon known as the Third Melt. This disaster reduced one of Tokyo's busiest downtown areas to nothing in a single night. That it did. And there is the 107 building. The high-rise buildings that had birthed so many trends and fads collapsed, as if giving up on their role in society. Black fires spread through the city. As individuals fell into the grip of the crowd psychology, their terror was magnified. Combined, all of these things took many lives. A very somber day indeed. The final death toll was 3,851. The final number of injured, 30,927. This event would later be known as the Shibuya earthquake, though as I just mentioned, its true name is the Third Melt. Even in all that destruction, people still suffered the most in their hearts. Some who had lost their families came together to share new resolve, while others who had been forced to watch their friends die were driven by guilt to take their own lives. As the baby was miraculously reunited with its parents after 72 hours, a child in an evacuation shelter asked her dad, "When's mommy coming home?" He had no answer. Some of the wounded made it to hospitals by looking at real-time updates on the web. Others saw people on the internet talking about the disaster as if it were a movie and were driven mad. It was more than just the earthquake that drove people mad. Much more. A homeless man was saved from malnutrition by an organized volunteer group. But at the same time, a middle school boy punched a self-centered volunteer who'd come to Shibuya to find himself in the face. It was the first time in that boy's life that he'd ever been violent. A side effect of the third melt, and interestingly, no mention has been made of those at the epicenter of this tragedy. But then, who else in the public eye would have known? The psychological toll was incredible, and many of the survivors would later manifest symptoms similar to those associated with PTSD. And you'll notice that PTSD is actually color-coded blue. I wonder if I can bring up the menu. I can, and this menu actually looks incredible as opposed to the menu from the original ChäoS Head. But then again, ChäoS Head came out in 2008, and this came out about 4 years later, I think. I didn't see the actual date, but well, like Steins Gate and all the other titles in the Science Adventure series, we can actually look at the tips, with the exception of ChäoS Head, because the translation patch didn't unfortunately translate the tips in the original visual novel. Post-traumatic stress disorder. And since it's rather long, I'm actually not going to read it out. You can just pause the video and read it for yourselves. But it is worth reading. Oh, it's not that long. Actually, you know what? I'll read it myself. Taking back what I just said. Post-traumatic stress disorder. From the 4th edition of the DSM-4, the American Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, published in 1994, caused by severe shock from experiencing an accident, disaster, crime, or other serious traumatic event. Or seriously. This mental disorder causes any number of stress-related issues. Symptoms include psychological instability, insomnia, confusion, memory trouble, and other problems that last for over a month. And it is tip number 88, as it's so conveniently marked there. The more you know. The young were hit the hardest, and before long the causes of those symptoms were given a name. ChäoS Child Syndrome. Name drop, which wasn't present in ChäoS Head. Interesting. Rebuilding happened at a feverish pitch never seen before, so the people of Shibuya did manage to rebuild their shattered, ruined city after all. It felt inappropriate to say hang in there, but people felt that somebody had to do something. And as you can see, and as you can hear, the atmosphere is quite different from that of ChäoS Head. Subtle and ominous. The new slogan was Shibuya, a city reborn, and no amount of money or manpower was spared in aiding the endeavor. whole town was in the grip of a fever. In private, a leader of the redevelopment efforts said, "This may sound unkind, but this frenzy feels like a town bearing its grief by holding a festival." Which is actually a pretty apt statement, if I do say so myself. Building codes were rigorously evaluated with an eye toward earthquake engineering, perhaps in an effort to emphasize the city's safety. Security cameras were put up all over town. Shibuya would become a place where everyone could live in peace. Which is an interesting sentiment given what transpired before the third melt. For there was another series of tragedies plaguing Shibuya at this time. A strange series of serial killings designated by the media of Shibuya as the New Generation Madness. Strange that that has not been mentioned once. But then again, I might be wrong. But at the same time, a rumor began to spread about the earthquake. Something about this earthquake doesn't make sense. Which is true. There were no aftershocks, and the damage had spread in a strange way. It wasn't the only strange thing that transpired in the wake of the earthquake. For the third melt was actually the second earthquake, and I'm giving away certain details, but still trying to remain as vague as possible to keep in the flow of ChäoS Child's present style. Harajuku and Ibutsu, areas only a kilometer away from Shibuya, suffered few casualties and even fewer collapsed buildings. The damage pattern had never been observed in any prior earthquake, and so more than a few pundits claimed the Shibuya earthquake must have been artificial. Little did they realize how right they were. More than anything, some of the survivors all said the same things. I saw a white light. Yes, indeed. That was part of what I was alluding to. I heard a sound like a ringing in my ears. And more besides. Too many people experienced this for anyone to laugh it off. But no cause of those phenomena were ever found. It was just more evidence to those who believed that something about the earthquake had been wrong. And yet, that evidence was right on the money. Then, 6 years after the strange earthquake, in 2015, at least we finally have a focal point for our timeline. 6 years. Something else was about to attract attention in the reborn city of Shibuya. Ominous indeed. And I would like to reiterate once again that I will drop certain hints here and there, or maybe in some cases just come out and mention certain things that happened during the events of ChäoS Head for the benefit of those tuning in who haven't seen my Let's Play of that series. But still trying to keep it short and brief so as not to completely break up the flow here. If you are God and the delusion becomes reality, about what kind of noise you get, and I couldn't read the rest of it, but then I didn't need to. September 7th, 2015, Sunday night.
はい。ではいつも通り3分くらい募集をかけるんで、適当によろです。
I don't know who is speaking, but this blue sky is eerily familiar to me. Too familiar. The second he spoke, the comment box started to fill. So he's speaking to a live internet audience. Yuma Utani watched it for a few seconds, then saw the request. When does Haru tell us she's dating somebody? He smiled to himself. Also, keeping in mind the fact that traditionally Japanese names are usually the surname first and the given name second. So for all I know, this could either be Yuma Utani or it could be Utani Yuma. I have no way to tell at this present moment. Just what he wanted. Most of the requests were about hot actors or cute idols. His audience was so stupid that it was easy to tell exactly what they were going to ask. That's not very nice of you, good sir. The problem was always whether the name that came up was someone he knew. That was a question of luck and of how popular they were. Milking his audience. But Haru, her full name was Haruko something or other, she was fine. As in the normal kind of fine or the other kind of fine? Let's have a look at Haru's biography. Haruko Natsuno. Not that I would have ever guessed that name. Nor do I know it. 19 years old. A minor celebrity. Became famous as a result of her bold declaration that no one her age knew much about retro games and retro anime as she did, and her ability to back up that declaration up on internet radio and live streaming programs. Wears glasses. Her plain clothes and hairstyle are said to be one reason she's popular with otaku. Regular holdings of internet radio shows that are open to the public. I do not know who this Haru is, nor do I know if we will ever see her in person or not. That remains a mystery to me. Just a few days ago he'd forced himself to go to an event he'd rather skipped and seen it for himself, so as to not actually be called out by his unsuspecting audience.
Yoshi.
Satisfied, Utani got up to get some snacks, like he always did. He lived in a one-bedroom condo located 8 minutes from Shibuya Station. Cost 150,000 yen per month. It had been built after the earthquake, so the furnishings and layout were modern. They were rather small. A little more room would have been nice, but compared to the 40,000 yen per month place he'd lived in last year, it was heaven.
来年にはもうちょっと便利なところに引っ越すか。
I wonder if you have the salary to do that, Mr. Utani. At 21 years old, Utani felt satisfied for the first time in his life. In 4th grade, he'd gotten big into online gaming and stopped going to school. Eventually, he stopped leaving his room altogether. I wonder if this Utani is what is known as a hikikomori, a complete and total shut-in. Then again, the fact that he has gone outside, he is probably not a complete shut-in. Then he'd gotten addicted to drugs that made him sleepy, but did nothing else. That's an unfortunate turn. Once seeing only darkness in his future, he planned to commit suicide. In the chaos after the earthquake 6 years ago, he finally managed to leave his room, but his family had already given up on him. Excuse me, I'm just eating a bar of chocolate here. Thought you'd want to know that. After he failed his entrance exams, he went to live on his own in Shibuya, and he hadn't spoken to his parents since. And just give me a moment. Yeah, sorry about that, adventurers. Probably shouldn't talk into the microphone with a full mouth. But anyway, should also mention that I am playing this full screen, so because I want to try and keep these episodes at around 40 minutes or more, but since I'm doing this full screen, never mind. Let's continue with Uta's story. As far as they knew, he'd failed the exams 3 times in a row. In fact, he hadn't even gone to the tests after the first time. So his career is pretty much down the toilet. Although I actually have no way of knowing whether or not this man here, who knows, he could very well be the protagonist of ChäoS. I don't know. So many things I don't know. There wasn't anything he wanted to learn in college, or any companies he wanted to work for badly enough. He had no goal in life at all. But things were different now. 6 years later, I take it.
アットちゃんにもたまには本当のことが書かれてるもんだ。チーズでいいか。
Yeah. This wouldn't be a science adventure visual novel without good old @channel. A huge anonymous message board that's the largest of its kind in Japan. Its catchphrases, everything from hacking to the night's dinner. And its boards contain comments on every topic imaginable. As of 2015, half of its users are in their late 20s to early 40s, and the age of the average user goes up every year. The primary reason for this is believed to be that younger users are switching to social networks. Well, they do say that Shibuya is the city of young people. Or so the rumor goes. He took a block of cheap cheese he bought at the supermarket out of the fridge. Usually he never ate anything this cheap. Then again, living in an apartment like this, I would be surprised if he actually ate any fancy cuisine myself. But on Nico Niya live streaming, which is a pun by the way for those of you unfamiliar with anime, it wasn't just what you said, how you looked when you said it also mattered. It's another tip. Nico Niya live streaming. A live streaming service offered by Nico Niya. Just like normal videos, viewers can add comments into the video itself, and the streamer can see what the viewers are saying in real time. Nico Niya offers official streams as well, and while after the site's founding many of them were subculture related, lately they've now expanded into news, sports, politics and economics. As of 2015, their lineup is a match for any major TV station. Ah, the power of the internet. Utani wasn't a good-looking man, let alone a cute girl. He was just a plain, old guy, and so, to keep his program popular, he needed to make them think he was poor, barely managing to scrape by in fact. Definitely deceitful, but probably not that far off the mark. That was why he kept the area around his PC and parts of his apartment that you could see with his webcam completely plain. Last month he'd finally reached his goal of 4,000 viewers. Well, he's actually doing much better than me in this regard, not going to lie. But then again, I've never done live streaming, so that's probably the reason why. For a man with nothing going on for him, like Utani, this was extremely unusual. 3 months ago, he guessed the winners of a popularity contest a certain idol group was holding, as well as their total number of votes. That must have really paid off. Did he guess, or did he figure it out firsthand? After that, his numbers have been going steadily up. Late last month, when his streams had appeared at the top of Nico Niya's page, he'd seen a huge increase. Well, sometimes people just get big, and another Nico Niya tip for us. Japan's largest video sharing service, often used to refer to the site that offers the said service. Nico Niya, get used to me saying that, adventurers, is unique for the way user comments can be embedded into the video directly. Many of its users are younger and recently developed its own unique culture in the area of music. Did they had to soundbite what we just read in the previous tip? I don't think they needed to say that twice. Right now he gotten above 45,000. Wait, 4,500. Sorry, I added an extra zero by mistake. It was quite possible he break 5,000 by the end of the month. If he got 45,000, that would be impressive. It was around late last year when he'd started to wonder about his power. There was a certain rumor on one of @channel's occult boards that made him start to realize what he had. The name he'd chosen for his stream subtly reflected this. Then I learned I can see the future. Is it a scam, or is it actually true? Maybe she just has good intuition. He took out a knife to cut the cheese, like any normal person would. And an ominous tapping at the door. It was a strange sound.
Huh?
He thought he just imagined it when... Here it is again. He heard it again. I don't need to say these because we already heard the sound effect. It was coming from the door. Somebody is clearly here to see who's inside. Could be somebody from a neighboring apartment, or it could be somebody from a completely different part of Shibuya. Someone was clearly knocking on his door.
Huh? 密林か?
Jungle. Ah, I get it. I get it. Yeah, the science adventure series does a interesting way of subverting certain elements. Obviously, apparently, Jungle is an American online shipping site that is the largest in the world. It is said that 1 in 5 internet users has purchased something from it. It sells books, appliances, food, clothes, anything you can imagine is on sale there. But then what would the sales representative, well, apart from selling something, have to do with a guy like Utani? Suspicious, he walked toward the door to answer, then checked the clock. It was 11:41 p.m. Not quite midnight. Not exactly normal delivery hours.
なんだよ。つか、生放送中だっつうの。
Curious. He tried to ignore it, but the knocking continued. It was at the same rhythm, at the same pace. 1 knock, then 2 knocks, then 1 knock. Maybe it's some kind of code. As if the visitor's goal wasn't to come inside, but to simply make that sound. Could very well be. Then again, it's only speculation. Utani felt a bit creeped out. He decided to go to the intercom camera and see who it was, but then realized that would be pointless. Probably because he doesn't have one? Or... Oh, well, I called it. Only the auto-locking door on the first floor had a camera. The door to Utani's room on the 5th floor had an intercom but no camera. Not quite richly. Utani gave up.
くそ。つか、用ならインターホン押せよ。
Whoever it is isn't exactly exhibiting normal behavior. There it is, more knocking.
酔っ払いか?
A drunk person wouldn't knock so eloquently. No, the knocks were too steady for that. And there was no voice yelling at him to open up. Even more peculiar. He'd seen this door a million times, but suddenly it looked somehow different. Someone he didn't know was on the other side of the wall, demanding entry in the middle of the night. Somehow this made the door seem intimidating. I really should be paying attention to how to read the sentence. Utani thought he might look through the peephole to see who was outside. He was then disgusted to find himself too scared to even get close to the door, which is perfectly understandable when you're being greeted by a stranger. Wait, the intercom didn't have a camera, but it did have a microphone. He turned toward the living room so he could use the intercom and find out what they wanted, if they're actually going to talk. If they're not, then the intercom is pretty much useless. Utani, it's me, sorry to come by so suddenly. Would that these would actually be the words spoken? Or, okay, so somebody is speaking. He stopped when he heard that voice. Somebody he knows. Someone familiar to him. And peculiar music playing. Utani tried to remember who the speaker was, but found he couldn't. But from the tone of the voice and the words, they probably weren't a weirdo. Especially the fact that they know who Utani is since they just uttered his name. When they said, "I'm sorry," it sounded like they really meant it. But then again, given how little Utani leaves his room, how many people can he actually say he's acquaintances with? Utani sighed softly with relief, then realized he was still carrying the knife he'd been using to cut cheese. Reflex of habit, I guess. It suddenly felt stupid to feel so nervous. He quickly laid the knife on top of the sink.
はいはい、今開けます。どちら様ですか?
Who is it indeed? Will we find out? Don't you remember? The voice simply repeated itself, without actually being specific. But who are you? Utani whispered to himself as he opened the door. I think we're about to find out the answer to that question. And a gasp from Utani. Utani narrowed his eyebrows at the people standing there. There was more than one person, but only one of them was knocking. He looked them up and down, then looked at their faces again. Their eyes met.
あんたら、どこのどなた?
Oh dear. Utani suddenly felt a piercing headache. There was psychedelic flashing going on there. Just a moment ago. Utani closed his eyes and put his right hand up to his temple. He could feel the blood pounding in his veins through his fingers. He staggered and quickly put his other hand to the wall to keep from falling over. The pain was like the old days when he'd overdosed on antidepressants, but much more intense. I have a very bad feeling about this, ladies and gentlemen. He grit his teeth again. I think that's supposed to be against the pain. I think there's a typo there. He grit his teeth against the pain and dug his nails into the wall that was holding him up. We still don't know who the people standing at the door are. As he waited for the pain in his fingers to help dull the pain in his mind, his heartbeat is racing ever faster. He heard a voice he heard many times before, and felt a concerned hand on his shoulder. Well, whatever happened may or may not have been a result of the people here. Maybe it's unconnected. He somehow managed to ignore the pain and open his eyes. A worried face was peering down at him.
ああ、大丈夫。最近たまにあるんだ。
A plausible excuse, however. And curiously, we aren't hearing the voice of the other party, but they know who Utani is.
相変わらず心配性だな、お前は。大丈夫だよ。さあ、入ってくれ。
And yet Utani seems to know who they are, at last. He opened his mouth as wide as he could and moaned, trying to ease the pain as he led his important guests inside. As he turned his back on his guests, he told himself that it had been a long time since he'd seen them. Or maybe not. Or which is it? It couldn't have been more than 2 months since they'd last met. It only felt long because he wanted to see them so badly. Colleagues, perhaps?
そうだ。せっかく来てもらったのにすまん。生放送中なんだよ。
While he was out here, he decided he would cut some cheese for himself and his guests, who were still remaining anonymous. Whenever somebody says the words, "Don't worry," in this situation, you probably should.
いや、お前ら相手にそういうわけにもいかないだろ。ん？
What is it Utani has noticed?
いや、なんでもない。
The blade wasn't cutting into the cheese. That's strange, he told himself, as he pushed down with more force. He cut into its surface, and it made an unpleasant sound he'd never heard before. No matter how hard he pushed, it wouldn't go further. I'm getting a very unfortunate vibe here. I'm going to be honest. Something strange is happening. Confused, he yanked the knife back and forth like a saw, but it only cut in slightly deeper. It was as if there was something hard inside the cheese. And even though he'd only just taken it out of the fridge, it was slightly warm. Something truly bizarre is happening to Mr. Utani.
くそ、なんだよこれ。
At the risk of giving something away, I might hazard a guess. But a guess is all that it is, and so I will not say anything. Irritated, he slammed the handle of the knife against the cheese. But all it did was bash it in a little. He couldn't cut through it. I have a deep pit in my stomach right now. And those 3 words are not reassuring in the slightest. His guests must have heard the sound, because they rushed over. They had another knife. When did they get that out? The situation grows ever more stranger. There's a trick to cutting this thing. Why do I get the feeling that I'm not going to like this? They put the knife up against the cheese and began to move it with a practiced hand. But the sound I heard wasn't the sound of a knife. Not like any other knife I've ever seen or heard. They smiled at Utani, their voices slightly low. The fact that they're acting so genial in this situation belies their suspiciousness, but Utani doesn't seem to realize. Utani realized they were trying to keep their voices from being picked up by the streaming microphone and lowered his voice as well. Ominous that, and yet the warning signs are not going off in his head. He grinned and nodded. His guest had introduced him to a firm that handled advertising space for popular websites, which had been giving him regular work. Well, that explains his salary. If he's actually getting a salary, that is. His reputation had quietly spread throughout the small web advertising industry, and soon he was getting more and more offers.
流行を予想することが肝なこの仕事は天職だよ。出来レースみたいなもんだ。
You can't lose, you say. I think every gambler worth their salt has uttered those 3 words once in a blue moon. And why do these streams? And still no sound from the 2 people.
一言では言いづらいな。強いて言えば自分がどこまでいけるか試したいみたいな感じなんだけど。
How far you go, you say? Well, the only thing that I can say in response to that is, no matter how far you go, eventually there will be an end. That's right. His power wasn't meant to be wasted on jobs that anyone could do.
誰も経験したことないから誰かに聞くってわけにいかないだろ。だから自分でやれるだけやってみたいっつうかってかっこよすぎかこれは。
Done, he says. After he smacked it a few times, the cheese was lined up in was a little funny looking, but the even slices were lined up neatly on the plate.
悪いな働かせて。
Whoever these people are, they're not bothered in the slightest.
ああ、冷蔵庫の中適当に見繕ってくれていいから。ああ、静かにな。
And that worries me. That worries me a great deal. Utani took his cheese back to his seat and saw a flood of comments reading, "He's late," and "Did he log off?" What should only have been 3 minutes had turned into more than 15. Very odd. Utani put a bite of the cheese in his mouth and began to chew loudly.
申し訳ない。この安売りセールしていたチーズがありえないくらい硬くて。
Well, it certainly looks like cheese. Has the the appearance. It has the soft center and it has the skin of cheese. He apologized to the camera, remembering to keep up the act of being poor and starving. And as he hoped, the comments started to come in. And we got a tip there, but we're also seeing a lot of comments here and there, which is strange. But before we go further, let's have a look at that tip, which is basically a smiley face. Net slang, a Japanese counterpart of the English LOL, short for warai, which means laughter, and I completely butchered that pronunciation there. I apologize. Said to find its origin in certain non-Japanese online game which only allowed for the use of the English alphabet. By putting W's in the middle or at the end of a phrase, a user can indicate that they are laughing, often used on @channel and Nico Niya, and often used to indicate mocking or derisive laughter. Miyashiro believes a person's use of the sign is a sign that they are of low intelligence. And he refuses to use it himself. Who is Miyashiro? He actually, that's the first time I've actually seen that name. But going back to Utani, his audience seems to be fairly mocking in their comments. Utani's face took on a confused expression. The comments were strange. Yeah, they were pretty much all over the place. He thought there might be something on the camera, but he turned around and saw only his fake poor room.
どうしました
Is something wrong? I'm gonna hazard a guess and say that something could very well be wrong with this entire setup. He spoke into the camera, but the comments still didn't make any sense, and they were coming in faster. Maybe there was a problem with the camera. He reached his right hand out toward it. In an instant, his headache was back. Oh dear. A very splitting headache. It was the same pain as before. No, worse. He closed his eyes and jerked forward, banging his head against the desk. But the pain in his head was so bad that he didn't even feel it. Well, whatever this is, it's not going away anytime soon. And one wonders if this is natural causes, or caused by natural causes. He tried to hold his head in his hands, but for some reason his right hand wouldn't move. So instead he pushed his other hand up against his temple. It felt squishy. The vein was incredibly swollen, and it felt like rubber. And each time he felt his blood pulse through it, there was an unpleasant sensation in his fingers. Oh dear. This is much more than just a simple headache. Far more than just a simple headache. He stamped his feet against the floor, hoping to find some small escape from the pain. But it didn't even get slightly better. It was then that he realized he was crying. He could feel the tears coming from his eyes. The pain was moving there now too. And I think Utani's situation is about to get a hell of a lot worse. Call it my prediction of the future. Unable to bear it, he opened his eyes. And what is it that he sees? He gasped. Oh dear. The whole scene appeared in front of him like some kind of awful magic trick.
なんだこれ
Oh dear. Those seemingly peculiar comments are now starting to make sense. He suddenly heard the sound of something wet dripping onto the floor. His eyes reflexively turned towards it. Oh dear. His right arm was gone at the elbow, and the stump was gushing blood. Well, things have definitely gone to hell in a handcart. There was a pool of it on the floor, and the sound he heard was the new blood splattering onto it. Yeah. I think you can already guess what has happened. That cheese that Utani was cutting into, that wasn't cheese.
Huh?
There was a reason why it was so hard to cut into. Utani didn't understand what had happened to him. Sadly, I do. What was going on? He'd just gone to check on a knock at the door. But instead, it turned into something truly horrifying. The pain screamed within him. Any sense of pain in what remained of his right arm was overcome by the pain in his head. He felt nothing from his arm at all, though he saw the blood dripping to the floor. What the hell was going on? He blinked and forced his aching eyes to function as he looked around the room. Oh dear. On top of his desk, he found the rest of his arm. It was sitting on a plate. At first, it looked like it was still in one piece, but it wasn't. Oh dear. It was neatly sliced into uniform pieces. Each piece was about a centimeter wide, and the slices moved neatly through his fingers. They sat upon the plate in roughly his arm's original shape. Miraculously, he saw there was no blood on the tip of his index finger. He still didn't understand that it was really his own arm. But seared disgust at what he saw caused him to leap out of his chair. Unfortunately, Mr. Utani, it's too little too late. What was this? What kind of prank was this? Oh, it's no prank. The contents of his stomach flooded into his mouth. He vomited. The pink fluid splashed against the desk. A truly grisly scene. He saw something solid in the middle of it. It was a thumb. It was covered in bite marks, saliva, and stomach acid, but horribly, he remembered it. What? When did he put that into his mouth? In his pain-filled mind, he suddenly heard a sound he had never heard before. And the pain is back again. Each time he heard the sound, the pain in his head got worse. He turned toward the camera, hoping for an answer to what was happening. Unfortunately, the streaming audience will give him no answers and, sadly, no respite. course there was none to be found. The screen was still filling with comments, but his eyes were too filled with tears for him to read them. As the whole world turned red, Utani didn't even realize that his lips were turning purple. His lips had turned purple from lack of oxygen, but were stained red from the blood from his severed thumb, which he had chewed himself. As he tried to fight the pain, he began to fall unconscious, and tears fell from his eyes. And as all this is going on, the two mysterious individuals are nowhere to be found. Are they even still in the room? The tears seemed pink to him. Utani was weeping blood. He died, still facing the camera. And of course, for those of you who did follow my Let's Play of ChäoS Head, this phenomena should be incredibly familiar to you. His guests watched the chain of events unfold, and then silently headed for the door. So they were connected after all. Just before they left the room, goodbye, they said, as if nothing at all was wrong, and shut the door. Except that what has transpired was very, very wrong indeed. And little do the stream audience realize what has just transpired. Oh dear. September 19th, 2015, Friday night. A different day, a different evening. But that is going to be it for this episode of Let's Play ChäoS Child, and what a gruesomely macabre episode it was. When we return, adventurers, we shall see what else has been happening in fair Shibuya. As always, adventurers, until next we meet.